All right, welcome to 5,000 Miles, where we review only the best television and movies. In Pennsylvania, Vince is in Hawaii, and we are talking about season 8, episode 3 of Rick and Morty today. How we doing, Vince?
I'm doing great. I love Rick and Morty season.
What could be better?
Nothing makes me happier than to talk about Rick and Morty and that rush of coming home on a Sunday night after work and getting to watch a new episode of Rick and Morty. What's better than that?
Yeah, well, especially when they've built up so much momentum, because when you get two episodes like the first two, yeah, I'm like officially back up to being super excited about it. And you know what? I knew you were going to wear your shirt today, so not to be outdone. So, all right, well, episode 3, what'd you think of it, man?
I mean, this is another slam dunk. It's three episodes that I loved right in a row. So definitely the season is off to a great start. This episode was entitled The Rick, the Mort, and the Ugly, which of course is a reference to the 1966 classic Western, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Have you ever seen that movie by any chance?
I have not, but the Bouncing Souls first album is The Good, the Bad, and the Argyle, so I knew the reference.
Okay, yeah, it's a classic Clint Eastwood movie. It's directed by Sergio Leone, and it's often considered to be one of the greatest westerns of all time. So if you have never seen it, worth checking out. But yeah, this was sort of like a western version Rick and Morty episode where we get
Yeah,
to
but
follow. I don't know. I guess we could call him Farmer Rick.
But yeah, you remember that article that you shared with me where we were reading a preview of season 8, and they had said in the article that there is a an emotional sequel to the Citadel stuff. And I remember they said they referenced that there was going to be this episode. I didn't think we were going to get it in episode 3, but here it was, man.
This was really great. It was great to see them do a twist on a Citadel episode because we know the Citadel is destroyed. We see it in the background. Actually, I have that as my background
Yeah,
today is the
I love
destroyed
it, man.
Citadel in the background. And I don't know if you noticed, but that particular shot is a reference to a very specific shot in The Force Awakens. You see Rey on her speeder and she's driving through the desert and you see like a crashed starship in the background.
Yeah, man, I loved the world that they took us into. Like, for us to be revisiting the Citadel, I mean, I put the original Citadel season 3, episode 7 episode up there as one of the top 2 or 3 of all time. Anytime they do Citadel stuff, I get like super excited.
Yeah, because the original Citadel episode, the Rick Lantis mix-up, is possibly the greatest Rick and Morty episode of all time.
Yeah, between that and Total Recall for me. But yeah, but they're top 2 probably.
Yeah, so what I mean, what a great episode. And now that all the original, all like the Ricks and Mortys have been teleported back to their original dimension.
Yeah,
Now
actually, I want to talk about that a little bit because I had a
we,
question about that.
yeah, so we know that all the original Rick and Mortys have been kind of like sent back to their original dimensions after the big reset that happened.
Yeah.
And so these aren't actual Rick and Mortys from other dimensions, they're clones that were cloned in this dimension. Presumably, they were sent out to different dimensions where they all found homes. And then after all the portal travel got reset, all these clones got sent back to this original dimension.
Yeah, so we check in with our new Rick. He's there, and I guess he is. I'm not exactly sure what his life is like. Like, what is his motivation? He's in there. He's got the crystals. He's farming crystals,
Yeah, so we
and
don't find out until later, but all those crystals that he's farming and processing is being
yeah,
used to make the fluid that goes in the big vats
yeah.
that are used to clone Mortys. And so we find that out later on in the episode that
And why would he want to clone Morty's?
well, we find out that his backstory was that he was the head Morty cloner, like
Yeah,
geneticist, working for the Citadel of Ricks.
yeah. So if they didn't fuck with him in the way that they did, and make him have to go on the whole revenge thing that happens in the episode. You think that his existence was just chilling there and maybe selling Mortys to evil Ricks or whatever? Like that's kind of what he was.
The Ricks that we saw that were kidnapping and selling Mortys were the ones that like shot him and left him for dead. So I don't think he was involved in the Morty trade anymore. I think that at this point he just really wanted to be left alone to his own devices
Right.
and run his genetic farm. You can see that he had like some genetically mutated animals on his farm, and it seemed like he was just content to be left alone finally.
Did you
Um,
notice? Did you notice when he goes over and you see his pigs, right? The mutated pigs, the one of them sick and
One
it
of
like
them's sick, and then
sneezes.
he separates it, and then he puts up a little barrier to keep
He put
his other animals safe.
They were showing us early on that was a real subtle way to show us that they weren't just like fucking livestock. Like they were his pets.
They were his pets. He does care about them. We
Yeah.
know for a fact that his favorite pet of all of the pets was that two-headed pig, that sort of like mutated two-headed pig. And we
Yeah.
find that out because later on in the episode, he's got a locket that
Yeah.
has a picture of the pig in it. Also, the song that's playing when we're first introduced to the farmer Rick, that's a song called "Luckiest Man" by the Wood
It's
Brothers. And I thought that was a perfect song to use. It really set the tone for sort of this like Western, this like loner Rick vibe that he was portraying. And so, yeah, I thought that was the perfect song to use for that scene.
it speaks back to something you said in our last review where you were like, man, they're just so good at creating this rich tapestry and then pulling it away from you. In that same vein, they can just strike a mood just like that. And part of it is with the use of music. And I thought that this song was just like, man, it just set it up perfect for sure.
And that's not the only song that was featured in the episode because
Tori
we
Amos.
also, you want to talk about the Tori Amos stuff? I don't know where that came from. I don't know if it was just like a random joke that was thrown in there where for some reason this Rick is a big fan of Tori Amos, but
Uh,
after his house gets burned down, he goes in and he sees that they have written a note on the floor that said, "What grown man listens to Tori Amos?" And then they also deface his Tori Amos CD and draw like a little poop on there,
and they call him a soy boy.
and they call him a soy boy for listening to Tori Amos. And then, fun fact, that album that he has, the name of that album is Little Earthquakes, and then the titular song from that album, the name of the song is Little Earthquakes. That's the song that's playing later on in the episode when they're having the big fight scene at the end.
This episode to me is an example of just how many possibilities Rick and Morty truly has created. This is a
I mean, they can
really
do anything.
incredible
They
anything,
can
man,
do
but what
anything.
an episode. And I mean, Rick and Morty is just as much about the fallout from our Rick and Morty's behavior as it is about our Rick and Morty's behavior. Like
Yeah,
we could stuff that they did and that they're not even participating in anymore, and that shows up big time at the end when that Morty, which I gotta say, man, having that Morty sit there at the end is not only sets up that joke of showing that our Rick and Morty are living and not giving a shit about all this stuff that's happening because of their behavior. They're also keeping a now known character in the Citadel universe to be potentially revisited. So if we were to revisit the Citadel again, it would have to start with the Morty that's there at that farm, I think.
I also thought it was a really great nod to the Rick Lantis mix up because this entire episode, it seems like every time they do a Citadel episode, our Rick and Morty, the C-137 Rick and Morty, are not in it and don't have anything to do with it. Just like in the Rick Lantis mix up, where our Rick and Morty disappear at the beginning and then they just show up at the very end. That's the same exact thing that happened in this episode where we see them land on the planet and then Morty asks about the farmer Rick, like, what's his deal? And Rick says, I can't imagine anything worse than having to know.
Then
And
having to know
as,
it just
as
flies
soon
away.
as soon as he said that, I knew immediately, like, all right, now the episode is going to stay on this Rick the entire time, and that's what we're going to be seeing.
Yeah.
And of course, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about Big Rick, who was he was created as the mascot of a gumbo hutch. Big Rick's Gumbo Hutch was a
Yeah.
place that was on the Citadel. Big Rick at one point says the catchphrase for the Gumbo Hutch, which was "Get your
Yeah.
mouth around it." And as soon as he says the catchphrase, one of the Ricks in the background, just off screen, goes, "Oh, that place has good curly fries.
He's like, you been there?
You been there?"
Yeah, man, I got a fucking
I
kick
mean,
out of
I
that.
thought that was so funny.
He's sitting on his throne or chair, whatever, and he's got a Morty that's specifically in charge of like turning him around. He escapes later because he's still sitting in the chair, and then it gets blown half apart, and that Morty's able to escape.
I know all you guys out there were concerned about chair crank Morty, but you can see he does get away safe at the end. So fear not.
Fear not, chair crank Morty's on the loose. The odd job Rick.
Oh yeah, of
That's
course.
like a James Bond thing because they do that in, remember in Austin Powers? They had
So it's
a play on him with the hat throwing.
yeah, it's in Goldfinger is the James Bond movie that's from. Yeah, man, I gotta say I have been so happy with the season so far. This episode was just fantastic. I loved every moment of this episode, man.
Yeah, man, it was a big swing. You know, they're going back to the Citadel, which is maybe my favorite part of Rick and Morty across the board. If I had to pick one, you know, it doesn't matter.
The one of the other things that this episode really helped to highlight is now that all the now that the Citadel is closed and all the Ricks have been sent back to their own dimensions, how rare the portal fluid is. Because like
Yeah,
you start to think about the fact that everybody has portal fluid, but it was really only our Rick and a handful of other Ricks that had access to interdimensional travel.
yeah.
So this episode really highlights just how rare it is for other Ricks to be able to travel dimensions. And in this episode, we see that some of the Ricks are being paid in portal fluid.
Yeah, and they're like saving up for a jump. That's like what
Yeah,
that's their reality now is that we're gonna work for the guy who somehow has some fluid, and then he's piecemealing it out like little drops of the fluid.
the last time that we saw the idea of portal fluid being rare was in the Ricklantis mix-up episode because there's a grandpa Rick living with a bunch of Mortys in like a rundown kind of crack house, and he's
Yeah,
looking up bootleg portal fluid.
exactly.
And it ends up killing them. So not only do you have to appreciate the fluid that you have, but don't mess around with bootleg portal fluid, guys.
Unless you're evil Morty, and then you can
And let
create your own yellow portal fluid, which
yellow.
may be even superior to Rick's. We don't know.
Well, I wouldn't say it's superior, but it does have that benefit of being able to transport you outside the
Of
central
the
finite
central
curve.
finite curve. That's right.
All
So,
right.
all right.
Well,
Well, another 9 or a 10 on IMDb for me, man.
another top tier, S tier episode, I would say. And I
Yes.
think that's going to wrap it up for this week. That was the Rick, the Mort, and the Ugly, season 8, episode 3. What a banger.
Yes, sir. So
All
yeah,
right.
tune in next week. We will certainly be dropping it right after episode 4, and we will go from there on 5,000 miles, baby.
Yeah, so don't forget to let us know what was your favorite moments of this episode. Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you next week on 5,000 Miles.
All right. Thanks, guys.
That's the way the news goes.